It is Saturday, August 23rd, and it's getting pretty late with Jake Landau. It's not a Sunday, and it's also not a Monday. We are playing around funny with the schedule this week, folks. My apologies on that. But we do have a very good guest who justifies it. He's, first and foremost, a friend who I like very much, but also he's very qualified. He's a journalist, he's an author, he's a political commentator. He's also got a doctorate. His name is David Moscrop, and he's here to talk to us about his work and then also about, as usual, our three headline topics of the week. So, David, thank you for joining the program.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
No, I mean, like I said, like you're very qualified to talk about political topics in Canada. You've written a lot, and also you don't put doctor in front of your name, but you do have a doctorate, PhD in political science from the University of British Columbia, right?
I do. I don't want anyone thinking I can heal them.
Valid. I know I know people, a lot of PhDs are like, oh well, I'm not a medical doctor, I don't want them to talk to me on a plane if someone has an incident. But
We
I'm of
were
the
first, though.
yeah,
We were. I will say this: we were first in the doctor nomenclature.
right. Eh,
We did come first.
but also, more in your guys' defense, I'm of the opinion that, getting a PhD is really fucking hard. So it's like, is putting it in front of your name a little bit smug? Yes, but I think it's an earned smugness. And I think earned smugness, I think especially can piss people off because it's earned. They know, you can't do anything. It's just that meme of like that young boy who's like, congrats, happy for you. Nice.
That's
But
true. For the most part, they can't take it away from you. Every so often, they actually, in fact, can take it away from you.
yeah.
It's proven that it was fraudulent, but in my case, alas, it was not. It was very much earned in the sense that I grinded it out,
Right. You
and
didn't you did research. You did an actual thesis.
I did. Yeah,
Yeah.
I wrote, and it became my book actually.
Fun. So essentially, so it's on the similar lines to the actual topic of your book. And I know in the prologue and forward to the book, you talk about going over with your thesis advisor, like what you actually want your thesis topic to be about. For those who aren't aware, David's book came out on March 5th, 2019, published by Goose Lane, and it's called Too Dumb for Democracy: Why We Make Bad Political Decisions and How We Can Make Better Ones. Now, we were making a lot of bad political decisions around that time, and in the 6 years or so since publication, we've been making increasingly worse ones. So, David, my first main question for you: do you think human beings are fit to rule ourselves?
It's complicated, and I know that's not a satisfying answer, but uh,
Well, it's not
yeah,
as negative as I was worried about.
no, because there's a kind of subculture of anti-democratic thought that is contemptuous of self-governance because we're so flawed.
Right.
But
There is a
then,
fascist tendency in it, even. It's
well,
like, oh, those people are too stupid. Luckily, I'm built different.
well, exactly, or or it's
Yeah.
otherwise authoritarian or autocratic, and then often the rejoinder is, okay, well, what's the alternative? Some sort of enlightened autocracy, enlightened despotism, or technocracy, and like actually those are all worse. So
Yeah.
I start from the position that we all have a kind of moral value and moral worth that itself justifies self-government. There's also a kind of functional value. And then we say, okay, well, what are the problems? And we run into all the many, many problems that people are familiar with. And then we say, okay, well, how do we solve for those? And the solution for those problems isn't autocracy or technocracy. It's improving the democratic capacity and opportunity for individuals, both at a kind of psychological level, at a level of actual skill set, but also at a material level.
So the idea when you saying proving people's like democratic capacity, you mean like actually improving their ability to be political animals, like to
Exactly.
like conceive of politics, to talk about things. But ultimately, like I've realized, like a lot of people, it's not because they don't want to, it's not because they're stupid, it's just because they're poor and they don't have time to think about a lot of these things because they're busy at work trying to pay for rent and for food.
That's essentially the one of the core theses of my work and of my book, and that's exactly right on the money and very well put, which is basically, we are political animals. We do have a sense of what we want. We do have a sense of what's good for us, but we lack not just the time, but the broader resources to engage and the opportunities to engage, but also the opportunities to build a skill set, because we do have fundamental political interests and preferences, but we do refine those, right?
Right.
Like you refine everything else. And the analogy I often use is it's sort of like hitting a fastball. Like everyone's born more, I should say, most people are born with the capacity to swing a baseball bat, as they age. But it doesn't mean you're good at baseball. You've got to
Yeah.
work on this skill. You're going to hit a fastball. You got to get good at
And
hitting a
hitting it at
fastball.
60 miles an hour doesn't mean you can hit it at 90 miles per hour.
Exactly, but
Yeah.
you can learn, right?
Yeah.
I mean, but we don't really privilege people typically in a way that allows them to do that. We say, actually, you go off and you go produce value for the shareholders and leave the governance to the politicians. And every 4 or 5 years, we're going to come and ask you for your vote and pretend we care about you. Then we're going to disappear.
Yeah, and as someone who has recently divested myself of partisan affiliation federally, I can certainly relate to this growing cynicism. Like,
That was my arc.
yeah, and is it fair to say that like the cynicism with corrupt and flawed democracies creates anti-democratic tendencies?
Oh, without a doubt, it does.
Yeah.
Without a doubt, and whenever there is expressions of that cynicism, I always ask, well, who benefits from that, right? Who does that serve? And the answer is very rarely the people. It very rarely serves the mass public
Right.
when that cynicism is
I
endemic.
can
And
frequently understand the cynicism, but it's also very rarely productive.
well, it's just not
Yeah.
because what happens is people check out.
Yeah.
And when they check out, elites say, okay, well, don't worry about it. Don't
Yeah.
bother checking back in. We'll take care of it. And then you get, the Ontario Liberal Party.
Yeah, yeah. They have like 2 or 3 weeks to
Yeah.
decide whether or not they want to be completely morally bankrupt or just partially.
How do you think it's going to go?
I genuinely don't know. I would think at this point that there's no way that Bonnie Crombie could scrounge up 50%, but she might.
Mhm.
I
She
mean,
might.
also like even like also it also just depends how much she actually loses by if she does lose. Like if it's only
Yeah.
I don't know. I think when a politician really wants to stay on and you're dealing with them trying to motivate them by shame instead of actual like ironclad rules, you deal with the fact that politicians are like competitively bred through evolution to not feel shame.
That's right. And instantly, it also then matters who shows up. I mean, if
Yeah.
the little things start to matter of who's organizing on the ground,
And
where is the thing
registration
being
fees
held.
just to be a delegate are like hundreds of dollars. I'm lucky in that since I'm 25 until November, I got the $100 fee. But it's like it reflects who can afford to go to these things.
Exactly.
There's actually supposed to be on paper a low income thing. Yeah, no. Like,
Not so much.
yeah, like, did you think the liberals were going to follow the rules passed by their own members and voted on paper? Nah. But yeah, honestly, we'll see. I'll probably be disaffiliated too on the provincial level after that, but I will give it that last college try. But enough about me, David. Enough about my cynicism with politics. How do we cure other people's cynicism?
Well, it's. I guess one way to put it is that there is no cure. It's more like you manage a chronic condition rather than cure an acute one, which I guess is
So
a
it's
somewhat
like
disappointing.
it's like major depression.
That's right. That's right. It's
Okay.
every day you're doing the work.
So I take like my Prestique and my Risperidone. What do we prescribe the mass populace? What pharmaceutical do we need to obtain?
Well, this is the good news. And the good news is there are treatments that work. And one of them is engagement. One of them is actually, organizing at the community level, the local level, taking part in movements you care about. Whenever someone comes to me and says, like, where do I even start? I would say, look around you.
Care about your
immediate
neighbors.
vicinity, big time.
Yeah.
And then you can scale it up. You can build those skills. You can look at the next level, whether it's subnationally, nationally, internationally. but you got to start somewhere, and often the community is the best place to start. And incidentally,
Do you
often because that's one
find
of the more
that
tangible
in
spaces.
Western communities, or at least in North America, I can't speak to Europe as much, but that there's a bit more of an isolationist and individualist streak that harms that ability to build community ties?
Yeah, it's liberalism, and
Yeah.
I don't mean to dismiss liberalism as such because it's complicated. But I've written about this in the past that in a sense, liberalism and its expressions are so thin in many ways that they actually undermine the capacity for long-term democratic self-governance because it asks rather expects very, very little from people, and it hollows out citizenship. And this is what
Citizenship
communitarians
is
and
just
civic
rights,
republicans
but not
are.
responsibilities.
That's right, and you make rights claims, and you then become fairly bad at adjudicating between competing claims because your response is, well, no, hold on, my right. What are you
Right.
talking about? Your rights. What are you talking about? Limits to or trade-offs? Hold on, I've got a
I
right. I'm an individual.
And I know like a good example of that is in the US where they had the baker who didn't want to bake cakes for gay people or whatever it mutated in. Or there's been multiple variations on that kind of case, and they cite religious preferences. And liberalism says on its face that you have freedom of religion and that you have freedom of sexual orientation. But the problem is what happens when someone says their religion is against someone else's freedom. Should the government protect their right to discriminate against other people because they also have a protected ground?
Well, and this is where liberalism runs into communitarianism, civic republicanism, and thicker conceptions of self-government that says actually we have a community here that's going to set standards and rules and expectations grounded in normative preferences, right? That precede or rather overrule certain rights, which is say that okay, no, we think that we want a thick concept of individual self-expression and belonging, which means that you don't get to discriminate on the basis of sexuality, sexual preference, gender, race, physical ability, mental ability, whatever it might be. And those things precede individual rights, commercial rights, and so on and so forth. And that's a completely legitimate position. Incidentally, that's my position. That's
Yeah, that
my
would also be my position that people should have equal rights, that you can't discriminate against in a functional society. Or it won't
yeah.
be a
And now there
functional
is
society for very long.
exactly, and you very quickly run into the paradox of tolerance, and that if you tolerate everything, then you lose the capacity to tolerate it in the first place. So you do have to draw lines. If someone's a Nazi, you say, okay, no, hold on,
Right,
I
it's
reserve the right to
like
not
the
let you
old
be a Nazi in
adage
my
that if
space.
10 people sit down at a table with one Nazi and no one has a problem, it's now 11 Nazis at a
That's
table.
exactly it.
Yeah.
And incidentally, we're that is a very real issue now. It's not just a theoretical conception. We're
Right.
now in real time seeing how far we're willing to go here.
No, and I will say that most people are failing the test.
Yeah, and if you look, I talked about this a couple of years ago when it was inconceivable to even talk about it, but now it seems that it's actually de rigueur to talk about it, which is how far are we willing to let the United States go before we draw a line and say, no, we can't roll with that anymore. And it seems like the answer is we're willing to go actually quite far.
I thought we had got there, and maybe that was too much hope or too much self confidence in our country. But like we seem to have just fully given up the ghost. Like I know I tweeted that yesterday. Mark Carney was giving up live on television.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and it's always sold as, well, savvy negotiations, and okay, I suppose, but
Yeah.
how far are you willing to go before we say, hold on a second. You've now got the Trump administration rolling out the armed forces in cities in the United States,
Yeah.
and we're sitting here saying, well, can we get a slightly better deal on tariffs?
Yeah, and meanwhile, we're passing Bill C2 to give the United States full access without any warrant to
Yeah.
the medical records of women, Canadian or American, who get abortions here. Like, I'm sure, like, the Liberal Party that talks about how much they support a woman's right to choose is not talking very much about how they're giving up those women's names to a fascist state that wants to put them in prison.
I don't think they're going to lead with that.
Yeah, that's probably not the selling point at the fundraising dinner.
No, that might come up when the
Yeah.
House returns. I mean,
Yeah.
I think that bill's that bill's going to meet some serious contention in Parliament, and not to mention the courts ultimately.
Well, they just need to make sure the House doesn't return.
They wish.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, if you look at some of the trend in Canadian politics over the years, it's actually towards strengthening the executive and ministerial order, and orders in council getting privileged, and they
For
would
all
love
that
for
we
Parliament not
mock
to be
the
there.
Americans, they did actually have a system that had checks and balances. They just started ignoring those checks and balances.
They
We,
did,
on the other
and
hand, have none.
exactly, and of course, it also, part of that, the conception of the American checks and balances was that you would have friction between the branches of government, and you did for a very long time, because the party cohesion was limited, and this is what the fact some of the framers warned about, right? That
Right. Yeah.
factionalism would actually create a problem
Yes,
and undermine.
we all
Oops.
read Federalist Paper number 10 in AP US history.
And they were, it
Yeah,
turns out some of them were right.
they were right.
That
Yeah.
factionalism did undermine the
No.
checks and balances. But in this country, we actually kind of have the worst of both worlds, because we have the cultism that comes with that factionalism, but we also have an extreme concentration of power that has evolved consistently with
Yeah,
the
in
Constitution.
Britain, in their Westminster Parliament, like they'll have a lot more like backbench revolts against the front bench. Like there will be like lines being drawn. I know John Bercow was elected speaker repeatedly, like by backbenchers against the wish of their House leadership.
And there
Like,
was studies done of this, and you know what one of the tricks is to achieving that? Having more members of parliament.
yeah. Once when you have so many members of parliament or whatever legislature that they know there's no chance of them ever
Mm-hmm.
reasonably getting into cabinet or whatever, they grow more independent. But I mean,
That's it.
the other problem in Canada is that nominations are just completely unfree. They happen when the leader decides they're going to happen, and an incumbent stays the incumbent until a leader wants them gone.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like that's other credit where credit is due to the Americans. Like the Zoran Mamdani beat Andrew Cuomo in Ontario with the Ontario Liberals instead of the New York Democrats. Andrew Cuomo would have just been a candidate, and Zoran wouldn't have been greenlit at all.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And we've just sold off individual caucus capacity and freedom bit by bit by bit, to the point where the liberals won't even give themselves the
Yeah.
provisions of the Reform Act, as flawed as it is.
It's like after they just needed to get rid of a leader who didn't want to go initially, and they had to threaten him, and they won't then vote the Reform Act power to keep that power in case they need to do it to Carney too. It's foolish. And part of the reason I left the Liberal Party of Canada is because I stopped feeling sorry for these people. Why should I feel sorry for backbenchers that won't stand up for themselves? Why should I feel sorry for staffers that complain about their treatment and refuse to unionize? Like, you get the entire point. It's like, if you won't help yourself, why should I help you?
Yeah, at some point you're just throwing good money after bad, right?
Yeah.
This is exactly it.
I mean, the tax credits throw the money back a lot, but generally correct. Do you know, it's crazy in Ontario. It's like the only jurisdiction in Canada where the tax credit is refundable.
Can you imagine in a world in which I mean, I get it in theory, because obviously we need a vehicle for funding parties, and we don't want them running around taking money from God knows who and so on and so forth. So there's a balance to be struck. But
I don't even get it in theory.
refundables.
You know what the donation limit is in Quebec?
I don't.
$100
For individuals?
per individual.
Yeah.
Yeah, and meanwhile in Ontario it's 33,000 and something. So it's like no wonder you get more like populist and accountable to the public candidates when you have much lower fundraising limits.
Mm-hmm.
I guess this gets back to your book and back to how you're talking about all these ways to educate the public and to to reactivate their political consciousness. But ultimately, doesn't this bring up the big problem that the people people who benefit from them not being engaged are working hard to keep them that way and aren't likely to fix these problems they've created themselves for their own benefit.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
Once again, you've stated it precisely. And one of the ways I try to highlight the problem is, parties say we want everybody to vote, but that's not true, is it? They want their supporters to vote, or their likely supporters to
right,
vote.
like the whole idea of like get out the vote. Yeah, you just said
their
it.
People,
like,
right, based on postal codes. The advance in the technology and sophistication of political campaigns is that increasingly narrow target, right? Because you want the postal codes and the neighborhoods. You don't want to waste your scarce resources on people who aren't going to vote for you. But then you turn around and say, well, every vote counts. We want everybody to vote. But that's patently untrue.
Yeah.
And when you scale that up, you see that that's actually the broader problem, that politicians actually don't want citizens to participate in civic life unless they have a pet issue on which they need to mobilize people for a period of time, and then they hope they go away again.
They want to win, they want to maintain power, and then they will use people who support their movement when it is useful for them.
Yeah.
But they're also not as good as channeling public mass support and mobilizing them as they think they are.
No, and often you find that it will bite you in the ass. It'll turn around and bite you in the ass, and that's what we count on in a democracy. Is that that's actually a very important function.
Yeah, and I know with Doug Ford, when he tried to use the notwithstanding clause on school workers the other year, like it was the NDP were out there on the picket line, which I respect, maintaining the strike despite it being declared illegal because that's what you got to do. But it wasn't really the NDP or the Liberals that stopped him. It was just the mass public. It was the workers themselves. And we'll get into it a bit later in one of our 3 headline topics is about the Air Canada and that strike lockout. But it was a similar principle there. It's like the political opposition tends to not be the actual sitting opposition. It tends to just be the public themselves.
Yeah, the public both as a kind of abstract and as individuals, but also the collective public that as it expresses itself in different civil society and other organizations. And that's just a complicated way of saying the unions really stood up and said no. And in fact, for the first time in as long as I can remember, there was talk of a general strike in Ontario, and I think that scared
I know
the government.
Because in Ontario, like the Quebec unions were saying they were all going to come over and join the picket lines.
Yeah.
When that was going to be a problem, well, because for one, like the Quebec government didn't even do anything, and they would be suffering a massive labor loss and stoppage, like just so that their people could come to Ontario and help provide like bodily support to make sure they don't do anything crazy, like try and arrest people on strike.
And what it reminded me a little bit of is Prussia, 19th century Prussia, and 19th and 20th century Europe, where you get the evolution of the welfare state and also proportional representation, which in many cases was designed to forestall the rise of socialism. That was very particularly the Bismarckian response to the rise of socialism.
And a similar thing in North America in the 20th century with
the New Deal.
Like the idea was that when capitalism actually had to compete, which the capitalists love to talk about, it actually had to be better. But once there was no competition left for capitalism, it didn't have to prove itself to workers much more.
That's right, and that's the trick, right? That is the trick that the democratic liberal system and the capitalist system often plays as well. We can give you a little something here, but only in
the guy constantly telling his wife, "Oh, I can change. It'll be different this time," but it never changes.
No, then before you know it, you've got credit default swap burrito funding, through Klarna, right? Like this is
collateralized burrito swaps.
Yeah, we were joking about this over at my friends the other day. It's just how bad these payment systems have gotten, and they're a tech play, which that's about to find that.
Well, but that's the thing; they're not even really a tech play. It's just like.
Or a VC play,
it's just
right?
a finance play, just dressed up in tech or AI, and for all that, I do believe in the efficient market hypothesis, and that eventually things get priced correctly. But there can be a lot of market exuberance, and I would call it hallucination, frankly. Where like if
Well,
people have
yeah,
enough money to like throw at something, then there is demand for it. They may not be throwing money at it for a smart reason, but GameStop does happen on occasion.
for sure it does. But also, so does the financial crisis.
Yeah.
And I think when you're watching the I use Klarna because that's the one that comes to mind, but these financing digital financing options,
Split your
they do
burrito into 4 payments for
like
0%
literally
interest
you can
unless you
use
miss
these
a penny.
things.
But like
Yeah, like literally you can use these things on Uber and in so on in some cases. And it's
the gig
global
economy
financial
is
crisis in
getting
miniature.
very weird. I was in a Gulf town today and they had a DoorDash pickup.
Yeah, well, there you go. There you go. But what's going to happen when a recession hits the United States and everyone is overextended on burritos and stereo systems and whatever because they were told, hey, look, $50 a month for 5 years, what could go wrong? And they can't make
Uh,
those premiums. It's already happening,
this
right?
doesn't sound like the 2020s. This sounds like the 1920s.
It is.
Yeah,
It
like
is.
we're looping back. Like
And except for now, you've got quote unquote AI, which is also failing all over the place.
yeah, I mean, I'm kind of happy that the AI is starting to like show itself to be a little bit stupid
Yeah.
because as professional writers, you and I both, I don't think we're in a hurry to be replaced anytime soon.
No, although I say that with some irony or inconsistency, or if you're uncharitable hypocrisy, because I use AI for a handful of things, and the premier use for me is transcription. I use AI transcription through a service that is brilliant. It saves me a lot of time and a lot of money.
Well,
But you know what?
that's very
I used to be a
different. Yeah,
transcriber,
it's
but
like
it also puts a
yeah.
transcriber out of work.
This is also yeah, it does put a transcriber out of work. That's true, but that's more like how like light bulbs put the candle makers out of work. It's like it's not like stealing anybody's ideas. It's just transcribing your own
That's right.
words. Like the
Yeah.
generative AI, like, and also none of it's actually AI. It's just large
Yeah,
language
that's right.
models and
Yeah,
image
exactly.
models. But like a translation models, things that transcribe and translate languages, like, I think those have use. I mean, mind you, for something like a movie, I hate when they do it for subtitles.
Yeah.
But like for real time
So that's
conversation,
interpretation,
yeah,
right?
like for real time conversation, like I think if like you're on vacation somewhere, that's like an incredibly useful thing. It's the
Yeah.
Babelfish.
Yeah.
Like we dreamed about this. Like it's that's something that brings the world closer together. That's different for me. But like
Yeah.
so,
No, I agree.
but I get what you mean. And it's like it's not AI, but like I use spell check. Like
Yeah.
but I think some people are starting to call that AI now, and it has gotten smarter over the years. Does that make me a plagiarist for it catching like, oh, you forgot a U in your ending word with OUR? And like, no, that's just preventing people from accusing me of being an American in disguise.
That's right. Which these days
Yeah.
is risky.
I know. Well, I'm not. I can't. I'm guilty. I keep on putting up the meme of the three fingers from Inglorious Bastards.
It's funny you mention this because I'm thinking I'm teaching in the fall and I'm teaching a media ethics course, and we have to come up with a classroom policy for AI. And I think to myself, okay, well, students are going to use Chat GPT. If they run something through Chat GPT for a spell check and a polish, am I okay with that? I'm inclined to say, you know what? Yes. If they ask it to write it, no. But you do at some point start to blur a line, and I think, oh, okay, well, how do we navigate this? Right?
As
It's a practical
someone,
question.
I had an accommodation in university because
Mhm.
my hands cramp, so I got to type out things that were usually written in the blue books. But my general policy is that I think writing assignments now should just be in a blue book written, or if you have that kind of disability accommodation, then like on a computer set up like at the exam center where they control what's installed on it. Like
That's where we're headed, I
yeah,
think.
I know. To be honest, I'm fine with that. Like, I finished my bachelor's in the latter 2 years were during like COVID years. So there was a lot of like at home assignments where they're like, we know you're going to have a book beside you. So it's 24 hours and we're just making it harder because we expect you to have better citations than if you were doing this. You get the idea. Like
Yeah.
you are the professor, not I, doctor.
Well, but this is part of the question is what's the end here? What do we want from people? And so I say to my class, look, you're going to work together because I don't want to do exams. I don't think they're productive. So work together, talk about these things. Don't submit me a hive mind answer. You got to write your own answer, but I'm fine to
Have
consult
original
one another, right?
thoughts.
Yeah, because it's an ethics class. I
Yeah.
want people to reason through things. That's what I'm interested in. I actually don't really care, about the mechanics of the thing or how they get that reasoning done, provided they're actually doing it. And
So you
I
actually
think,
want to teach these kids.
well, I want to go back to first principles,
Yeah.
and this is, the way I run the class is, we talk about Aristotle and Kant and Confucius and so on and so forth for like 20 minutes at the top, and then we spend the rest of the course, dealing with reasoning through practical considerations on the job, every so often relying on these
I feel like this
philosophical
course
theories.
should just be in every curriculum for every major. Just teach people how to think through things.
It's Aristotle,
Yeah.
though. It's funny. This sounds like such a cop out, and to some extent it is, but it's a lot of Aristotelian practical
I mean, I was
wisdom.
talking about political animals. I'm not immune from
Yeah.
being
No, I
influenced
figured
by
you-
the Greek thinkers.
But very specifically, I think that
At least I didn't
like,
say Zune Politikon.
it's a virtue. I am a little bit biased, perhaps, but I think virtue ethics kind of got us there, and everything else has been redundant.
Valid. I guess before we go into the break, as a professional writer, but also as someone who teaches at university, as someone who doesn't just write like weekly columns, but you also are a published author, and I know working on a new book. What does the balance look like for you in actually making like a living? Like,
I've thought about this a lot, and our freelance, because I'm a freelancer, our freelance system in this country produces a handful of people who can make a living doing it, and then a bunch of people who are struggling. And those lines don't break along talent necessarily.
yeah,
In some cases,
I'm
they
one of
do,
the
but
struggling.
yeah, and especially when you're starting and you're younger, it is tough because you aren't the beneficiary of availability bias, because a lot of the work people get is because, well, okay, I know this person. I like working with them. They'll show up, they'll do a good job. And so I keep calling that person.
Right.
It's part of the reason why I try to recommend other people from time to time and
I know
bring
that's
everybody
how
along.
like I get my radio spots. So it's like when they know you and they like you, then they'll call you back as long as you pick up the phone. The problem is you got to get their attention, and it's really hard to get people's attention because everyone seems to have words now. Some of our words are better than other people's words, but everyone's pilfering them, and a lot of the columns just seem to be like not by actual freelance writers, but people advertising like a lobbying firm or like you get the idea. Like,
Oh yeah, that's endemic. But I've developed a system of, I call it the pillar system or the column system, not to commit a pun foul, but it's essentially, I've got a handful of regular spots that serve as fundamental pillars holding up the edifice. Substack is one, Jacobin is one, the Globe and Mail is one, so on. And every so often a pillar falls.
Right. I
Pillars
know
fall.
recently you I don't know how recently, but you left TVO because they dropped every columnist that wasn't John Michael McGrath. We like John. Like,
I love John.
yeah, John's
He's
great, but
fantastic.
I also like other people who are not also John. You get
The TVO thing was, I don't know exactly what went down there. It wasn't good though, whatever it was.
Doug
But then I
Ford
replaced it.
decided they don't get money anymore.
Yeah, I think someone, not me, someday should have a real dig into that. But whatever, I moved on.
Right.
And,
You replaced it. You got the Globe and Mail thing.
You got the Globe.
And it's like you've got your pillars. I know you did have the podcast at one point, although I know it's not going on anymore. But like so is the main thing just that I have to like juggle 3 or 4 different revenue streams, and then maybe I'll be able to afford to eat like some McDonald's?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit like what Picasso said, 100 years and change ago, which is basically luck should find you at work, right? I remember years ago I interviewed the painter Christopher Pratt, not the actor, the painter who designed the Newfoundland Labrador flag and many other brilliant works of art. And I remember I was a kid, I was a university student, and I remember him saying this to me, like, luck needs to find you at work. And he was paraphrasing Picasso, and it's really, really stuck with me. But it's true, right? Is to a certain extent, you just need to be out there doing the work, and when it hits, and that's not satisfying because it's imprecise and uncertain, and it doesn't always work for everybody, but it's actually genuinely pretty good advice.
Yeah, just keep plugging.
You gotta like again, it's imperfect and not everyone succeeds off of it, but the alternative is what just not working, right? I mean, if the luck is not finding you at work, it's probably not finding you at all.
It's like in that one episode of Star Trek The Next Generation where like Picard is explaining to Data that it's possible to not make any mistakes and still lose, and that it's not failure, that's just life.
It's just life, yeah. Yeah.
I like Star Trek. I like how when you put on the thinnest veneer, you can make people actually think about things. Maybe that's how we'll get people talking about politics again.
Well, I mean, if we had better television, it's funny. I just finished an interview with Mick Herron, the author of the Slough House series, and we were talking about how contemporary streaming services basically say to their showrunners, have the characters explain what they're doing, the dialogue,
because
nobody's
people
actually
aren't
watching
looking at the screen. I know it.
At a screen.
I hate when I'm like watching a movie with my family and like there's like the scene I'm really excited for them to see, and their phone is their head's in their phone, and I'm like, we got speakers from Babelor Radio, we have a 4K TV, we have a receiver. What more do you want? Like we have a homemade popcorn machine. Like, am I not doing enough to get your attention?
No, you're never gonna beat the little slot machine in people's pockets.
I know, but. Yeah, well, hopefully this podcast is entertaining people more than online gambling. Maybe not, but folks, if you want to waste $5.50 a month, you can give me a subscription instead of giving it to BetMGM.
Please do, and please do.
Also, please give it to David, too. If you get the founding subscription on his site, then you get a signed copy of his book. I have the digital copy, so I didn't get that. But if you're a paper book person, then please get that. And
I also hear it's on Pirate Bay, by the way.
Yeah. Don't pirate his book. Borrow it from a library. Like, there are ways. Yeah, you can read books for free in our society. Socialism
I actually do get money for that, too.
Yeah, it's like socialism has solved this problem. I actually, like, I bought your book on my Kobo, but, like, I've borrowed books digitally from my library because I just connect my Toronto Public Library account, and then it just loads them instantly to my reader. Like,
and authors get paid for that. I mean, to some extent, there's the public lending right program that you can sign up for if you're an author. And what they do is every year they do a sampling of libraries, and they essentially, give you a payment based
like
on
the
how
Spotify
many libraries
of
you're
books.
Yeah, basically, although it pays better than Spotify.
Yeah, which is that's not a high bar, but boy, that's
yeah. I think I get
$500-600
a year
right
from that.
No, yeah, but like, folks, that's why you should not ever pirate books. Socialism has solved the problem of reading books. You have libraries, and if your local library system doesn't have it, they can borrow it from a neighboring library system. Go thank a local librarian today, because having fun isn't hard when you have a library card.
Oh, I love that.
All right, folks, don't go anywhere. We'll be back after the break with our 3 headline topics of the week. Today's episode of It's Getting Pretty Late with Jake Landau is brought to you by me. Folks, all of my work is available for free with no paywall at jakelandau.ca. But in order to keep writing and recording, I need money, because money is what makes this show go round. So, if you enjoy my content or find it informative, please consider a paid subscription at jakelandau.ca/subscribe. And please leave a 5-star rating on the show in your favorite podcast app, be it Apple, Spotify, or a secret third thing. Thank you, and enjoy the show. And we are back with our guest, David Moscrop, author, journalist, columnist, freelance writer, many things, and I like him. He's a nice guy. But we're here with our first headline topic of the week from Abby Hughes at CBC News in the business section. The Air Canada strike /lockout/illegal strike but illegal strikes are even cooler because we call them wildcat strikes. Anyways, that's over. The union won, not with much help from the federal government, and the tentative deal includes pay increases for in the air, but most importantly, at least 60 minutes of ground pay for every flight, potentially more if for whatever reason there's that. And while it will be at 50% to start, it will go up 5% every year until it gets to 100%. Initially, what Air Canada only offered was just a flat 50% that would never change on the ground pay rate. So the union does appear to have won a significant industry-leading victory through wildcat striking despite the government declaring it illegal and trying to use Section 107. David, I know you wrote very recently on your own Substack about this. What do you think this means for the labor movement in Canada going forward?
So, I mean, all of this is pending the vote of members.
Course.
So they'll ultimately decide for themselves how good it is. And that said, they're restricted to voting on just the salary increase portion. But I think it's a labor win in the broader sense of well, let's look at the industry first. At the industry level, as many people have been saying, it's a precedent for getting ground pay in Canada. You've seen a couple of those in the US, Delta and a few others in another. And now we have it here in Canada.
And I know with the binding arbitration, like, I know how it works is they usually take contract language from other contracts in the country. They don't create new contract language usually where it doesn't exist. So because other airlines because other airlines in Canada don't have it really, they wouldn't have done that. They would have just increased maybe the flight pay more, which is fine. They'll happily take that. But the ground pay is the big problem because, you can't be working 35 unpaid hours a month. We have a word for that.
That's right. Well, and now you're going to see WestJet get it, and everyone will get it. Like, this will be the
right. This now helps with the binding arbitration if that happens in the future because there is precedent in contract language.
But more broadly,
but you also don't want the binding arbitration. You just want strike rights to be respected.
This is it, and this is what I think the broader labor movement might be, which is, for the first time, a union said in the face of the government using the labor code to bully them back to work by undermining collective bargaining and strike rights, no. Right. And then they won. And so maybe next time the government tries to pull this stunt, and they will because they've done it before, the union say, you know what? No, we're going to follow the lead of QP and Air Canada flight attendants, and we're not going to do it.
And to be fair, it's not like the first labor uprising like this in recent memory. No. Like we talked about on the first half, there was the Doug Ford thing, although he used the notwithstanding clause instead, which is even more blatantly extreme. Yeah. But it was essentially the same struggle, just one with a liberal, one with a Tory. Same old story?
Yeah, pretty much on this. It certainly was. And what was so egregious in this case was how quickly Patty Hyde...
Like less than 12 hours. Like there was no chance for a disruption to occur. And the total dollar figures they're giving for the disruption are really not major. Like,
no, because they didn't allow it to happen.
Right.
And Haidu acted
and the only disruption that majorly happened is because Air Canada preemptively locked them out. Like this is the thing. It's like they announced a strike notice, but that didn't mean every flight was going to stop immediately. I know the flight attendants said they were willing to do repatriation flights to get Canadians home. They just weren't going to do anything to send new people abroad. It could have meant like rolling strikes. Like they don't go to 100 immediately all the time.
No, but again, the government was so heavy-handed. They didn't want to let this play out. They're like, well, it's August, everybody's traveling and the economy and blah, blah, blah. And so off we go.
And I hate that because like, it's always going to be like you're saying, oh, it's too busy. And I'm like, it's just a normal week in the summer. It's like, if they really wanted to maximize the pain, the union would have put out a strike notice for like December during like the Christmas week. But like, you can't just say, oh, it disrupts people, so the strike is illegal. That's the whole fucking
supposed to do.
That's the
That's
whole
right. This is
fucking
why you do
point of a
strikes. This is
strike.
why I do strikes.
Like,
You don't do them because they're convenient.
it's like I get my middle name Abraham from my great grandfather. He was a communist in the Soviet Union, so my opinion on unions and strikes is hopefully pretty fucking clear. But like, I think they should be protected by the barrel of a gun, if anything. Like some of the proudest moments in Canadian history for me are things like the Winnipeg General Strike, not the government cracking it down, obviously, but the workers like standing up for themselves en masse in large numbers. Like, there's a lot of like union socialist history in Canada that kind of gets swept under the rug. Like, I know in the Ukrainian community in particular, like people don't understand that like after World War II, obviously there was a lot of like anti-Soviet people emigrated out of Ukraine to Canada. But before that, like there were a lot of like socialist Ukrainians in Canada, and their government kind of intentionally knew this would stoke some conflict and hopefully change the demographic trends of what that community supports politically.
Mm-hmm.
And thankfully that never led to anything embarrassing like the Yaroslav Hunka scandal. That would have been unfortunate, eh, David?
Remember that?
Yeah. It would be a shame if the government said they were going to put out the names and then said, nah, never mind. You're all distracted by the war in Israel and Gaza.
Welcome to
I hate this country. I love this country.
Politics in Canada. I mean,
I love this country, but I hate this country.
Yeah, that's I think the rational.
Yeah, it's the Canadian experience. I'd like a socialist party that can win, because it's like I was saying earlier on the first half of the show too. It's like what the union accomplished here for the flight attendants, this union of largely women who are getting screwed over by executives and government politicians who are largely men. My apologies to Patty Hydeshoe, but also look at who she's surrounded with. But you get the idea. It's like I'm not a fan of this. It pisses me off a great deal. And like there's just so many different layers to it why it pissed off Canadians too. And like, is that why you think there was more public support for it than there have been for things like the Canada Post strike?
I think people hate Air Canada. I think that was a big
Yeah.
I think the core thing is there's no sympathy for Air Canada. If this had been Loblaws, people would have sided with the workers as well because they hate Loblaws. If it had been Rogers or Bell,
people only hated Loblaws until we were told to put the elbows up, and then Galen Weston was the proprietor of a proud independent Canadian business.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of that in places, but Air Canada is not exactly a sympathetic protagonist, and so that was a huge benefit to the workers. There was the fact there's a gendered aspect, as you mentioned. The government was heavy-handed and absolutely botched it, so that helped. And by the way, I think conceptually people say, wait a second, you work 35 hours a month and you don't get paid. Like, you don't get paid when the airline is late.
It was a very different thing than
constitutionally
not being paid enough. Like, people,
exactly.
everyone can relate to that and be like, oh, yeah, I'll have to deal with that discussion with our boss. But like, very few people can relate to working for like 35, 40 hours and not being paid for it. Like,
exactly.
But I mean, that's also indicative of a larger problem we have with like labor policy in this country. I know months ago, like the Trudeau government got pissed off because the UN called the temporary foreign worker program modern day slavery, but it is.
Mm-hmm.
It just is. Like, it's like, oh, these people who, if they're not paid or if their boss abuses them in any way, they can't complain or they'll be kicked out of the country. There's certainly nothing untoward here, but no one wants to do anything about it. And like, the worst abuses are on the farms, but in their reforms they said they were exempting the farms because no one wants to pay more for food. And I'm like, you know what? I would pay more for food if it wasn't farmed by slaves.
Yeah, and
but also reduce your margins too.
Well, but this is part of it is that the government is obviously never going to attack anything that's going to raise prices, right?
Right.
If they can help it, and if you look at who was using some of the most egregious uses of these, like Tim Hortons, like, are you kidding me? And then we look and say, wait a second, what's the youth unemployment rate right now? It's in the double digits for sure. There's a disconnect here, and like
Right.
these places aren't
We
paying people enough,
we
obviously.
decided that higher unemployment was better than higher inflation. Like,
But, I mean, the same as it ever was, right?
same as it ever was. But like the idea was, oh, hopefully these unemployed people will die of starvation on the street and we won't need to worry about who they vote for
Yeah,
because even if they live, they won't have a permanent address.
yeah,
Like,
that's right.
like it's grim, and liberals who are listening at home may feel a bit defensive about this. I would invite you to prove me wrong and show you have compassion for other human beings.
Yeah,
Like, you can do it
exactly.
anytime, man. Like, I've praised you before when you do good things, so do them. Like, we're all waiting.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And but I mean, these are almost everything we've talked about today is a structural problem that is not new.
Yeah, and they exist because it's convenient for the people who want them to exist. Like, it goes back to like what we've said before about how to politically activate people in the country. You have to do things that the people in power don't want you to do because they don't want them politically activated. They don't
Yeah.
want to have to actually answer to people who work for a living on their votes. The liberals want to appeal to the 905, where people have six-figure salaries, and their main concern is whether Tommy or Jill is safe on their carpool ride to their private school where they never touch fresh air. Like
Yeah.
it, I have so little sympathy for it, and I'm tired of politicians pandering to it.
Yeah. Me
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. Well, moving on to another depressing topic from the minds behind Jake Landau is getting tired. Uh, and from the CBC in Manitoba, from Arturo Chang, is this elbows down? Manitoba Premier questions Canada's removal of retaliatory tariffs. Wob Canoe, not a fan, quotes, of move, says announcement took him by surprise. I don't agree with Wob on much. I've beat that horse into the ground, so I won't mention it again. But I seem to agree with him and Doug Ford on this. It's funny to me that all the premiers are like, well, wait, why aren't you standing up for Canada? The NDP ones and the conservative ones. Of course, it's easy for them to tell Mark Carney that because he's the prime minister and they're not. Nonetheless, like, it is funny that like immediately all the other first ministers are just going at him.
Yeah, and because in we were promised something, and I
Yeah.
think this is going to be a liability for Mark Carney going forward if he doesn't secure some sort of reasonable deal. He can't skate on, well, we have one of the best deals with them under
But why would
Kuzma.
Trump give him anything? Because Trump doesn't want liberals to be in power. Trump will intentionally sabotage it to make it easier for Polyev to win.
I'm not even sure he's thinking on that dimension. I just think
I mean, his
he's thinking I
advisors
can.
certainly are.
Oh, his advisors
Yeah,
probably
yeah,
in the broader conservative movement.
yeah.
But at this point, they're thinking, well, we can just keep extracting things from this country
Right.
because they keep rolling over the digital services tax on military spending,
Like, we keep giving up.
on the border, on, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
At what point have we taken a stand that's held? Or, we may supplement the fighter jet purchase with some Gripens instead of the F-35s, and we're still buying the F-35s. So at what point have we actually stood up and seen something through as a point of resistance on nothing?
Yeah,
Nothing.
like there's nothing. Like, we and I think the worst part is, like, yesterday we were talking about, like, a week or 2 weeks before Mark Carney's press conference yesterday, they were saying, if they won't give us a good deal, then we're going to do no deal. And then he comes out yesterday and is like, what we have is the best deal in the whole world. And I'm like, you were saying that wasn't a deal. That was just a temporary holding pattern. Like, now you're calling it the best deal in the world? Like, now you sound like Donald Trump.
Yeah, and I think they have decided that they can get away with speaking out of both sides of their mouth because they can play tough guy elbows up
Well, they
and
have
then
no
say,
political competition.
that's right.
Yeah.
At the moment, I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
again, we'll see how long this lasts
Yeah.
because Justin Trudeau was Teflon coated and untouchable. until he wasn't. And that will be true, I think, for Mark Carney, is he's got
Right.
a honeymoon period.
I
People
think
are giving him the benefit of the doubt,
he'll get
not
the
forever.
Paul Martin treatment where it's like the shine will wear off a lot faster when people realize how much of caucus is the same. And also,
Yeah.
he's going to have to pass a budget soon, and they bullied him into doing it this fall instead of next year. Initially, after he was like, I have a plan. And I'm like, where's the plan? Like, you were the same government, you were his financial advisor, Trudeau. Like, surely you and the PMO, which carried over a bunch of people, still had access to the same numbers and could have a budget ready much sooner. I think they just don't want people to see what's going to get cut in the budget. Like, they ran on like increasing the CBC's funding so they wouldn't have ads anymore. Now they're going to cut it 15%.
Yeah. And I was okay with them saying we need some time to get our sea legs, and the on the ground reality is changing with Trump and tariffs and so on and so forth. I'm like, okay, fine. And eventually they're going to have to do the estimates in the House of Commons and get supply. So there's that, which is the real budget. The budget itself is more of a PR
Yeah,
exercise, more of a
because
political document than an economic one.
then the next year they talk about how the numbers are actually going to be different this time. But this, like, I remember reading liberal budgets back when Bill Morneau and his constituency office, they used to bus me and some other young liberals up to go and watch it. When Chrystia Freeland became finance minister, that stopped because I've been a bit too critical of her in public. And like what I always found funny is when they would re-announce a number they'd announced the last year but hadn't spent yet.
Yeah.
And I'm like, then how is it part of the fucking annual budget? But I didn't care because I got a free trip to Ottawa. I got to sit in the members gallery. I got some free alcohol at the bar. And it didn't mean I agreed with people on half of the things they were saying, but I was a college student and that was enough.
Okay, but that's how it works.
Yeah.
Forever, by the way.
Yeah.
This is basically the premise of the whole system.
Right, like it's just a show. It's I like whenever I'm in Ottawa, and I try not to go anymore immediately because whenever I go to Ottawa, bad things happen to me, David.
Everybody.
But they really happen to me. But anyways, when I am in town, I try to go to like question period just because I like to put the earpiece in my ear and watch because it's just fun. And the security doesn't care as much when you laugh as they do at Queen's Park provincially. And occasionally they do say very funny things. I know.
They do. It's a very entertaining show.
I remember like in the last session, I would have, it would have been, I don't remember their name, one of the Bloc Québécois MPs. And I had the earpiece in because I'm working on my French. I'm conversational, but it's not good enough to listen along for political discussion. And he just goes on his question period like it was King Charles had just become the king. Lizzie had just died, and the Bloc guy was just going on about how it's horrible that we have to swear the oath, and it's good that Quebec got rid of the oath, and the federal government needs to get rid of it too, and that he would like cut off his hand before he kneeled at the boots of King Charles III. And I
the 17th, 16th century.
Yeah, and like I'm not much of a Quebec sovereigntist, especially considering my family's from Quebec, but I live in Toronto. But like what I do agree with Quebec wholeheartedly on is republicanism. Like I'm not a fan of monarchy, and I do like that they're present there, and they occasionally get to do some very, very funny things.
It's very entertaining. I will give you that. It is very entertaining. My position on all that is like I just can't be bothered.
Yeah.
But my God, what a show.
No, yeah, it's like if you're an actual like journalist or writer who's trying to get work done, you're not gonna like find much of use to you there. Like for the political gossip sheet rags, kinda, because you can have like the clips of he said what? Like it's worthless. The point I was trying to make is that it's whole like pantomime theater. It's entertainment. They should sell popcorn. They would. That's not even a joke. I actually think they should sell popcorn.
It's sodas, popcorn. Yeah. You can have a movie theater concession.
The soda will get sticky. Like the popcorn, you can vacuum them up. Like, but like, do you ever just see like the school groups they put in the gallery and just feel bad for those kids and their teacher?
they don't want to be there in the first place.
Well,
And what are they
I
learning?
mean, some of the kids do want to be there. Like, they still have like an optimism about politics, like, bless their hearts. But like these like young like grade 1 or kindergarten groups, I just feel bad for the teachers because you have the adults on the floor just heckling each other like animals, and then the teacher needs to explain to the children it's not appropriate for them to behave the way the government behaves.
Yeah,
Because I know they're gonna have the little shit-heel child like me who would say, but the premier called the person a blotherfucker. Like,
yeah, yeah.
uh,
It is. I mean, I understand why we do that, but actually, the broader problem is this: the theatrics and the toxicity of question period used to be at least atypical compared to the workings of Parliament on balance, and
yeah,
I
now it's
think it's
leaked
become
out to the
closer.
committees.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Like, once conservatives started using committees for media hits, it was game over for productivity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have days where I'm thinking like we should take the cameras out of it because they say, well, the cameras now it's
Well,
just social media clipping farming, right?
well, I
So
want them to have like the cameras fully under control, not with the limited angles. Like, if you're gonna go full reality show, like, go full reality show. Like, give us like the cool angles that I can clip for a column and say fair dealing. Thank you, CPAC. Uh, Folks, moving on to our final topic of the day, and as you folks know, we like to do a local one from a random city or town around the country, because every part of this country deserves their time in a spotlight to know what they're doing wrong. And today, from the Vancouver Sun, from Sarah Grachowski, I honestly don't even believe this, folks. I'm actually incredulous at this one. Vancouver parents blocked from teaching their kids to swim in public pools. Frustrated parents say enforcement of a vague city policy has prevented them from teaching their own children to swim, as demand for lessons far outstrips supply. Now, I'm not entirely sure here whether it's the city directly offering lessons or whether they subcontract out to someone through the city, but the city offers paid lessons at the pool, which a lot of city facilities do for a lot of pools and tennis courts and other things. That's fine. That's not a problem. But apparently they're saying that the lifeguard threatened to ask her to leave if she wouldn't keep teaching her own daughter how to swim in the pool, because apparently it's competing with the services. And also the park board says that anyone offering formal swim instruction must meet liability standards, including holding a municipal business license and insurance. And I'm like, that's just a parent teaching their child how to swim. So, David, for my no prize question for you for pointing out the obvious, do you think children should be allowed to teach their parents should be allowed to teach their children how to swim?
it's a loaded question. So I'm going
Oh,
to
that's a
I'm
hard
going to
one
try.
for you.
It's a tough one. I'm going to try to be as charitable as I can be with the city of Vancouver for a second before I talk about how absurd this is. I think the spirit of this poor bylaw is we don't want random people running unlicensed swimming lessons from
Oh yeah,
public
that makes
pools, which is
sense.
reasonable.
Like, you
Which
don't
is
want
utterly
someone like
reasonable
going and teaching like 3 or 4 kids, but like,
without a license,
yeah,
without liability insurance, because people could get hurt. You can drown in a pool, right?
right.
Fine. But this is what you have here is a vague bylaw and poor enforcement and irregular enforcement where you have overzealous lifeguards and petty Karens saying, "Oh no, you can't be showing your kid how to do the butterfly in the pool
It's
because
like,
you might be a private enterprise."
so
Like they just don't know what they're
your
doing.
answer is yes to the no prize question of the week for pointing out the obvious. Parents should be allowed to teach their child how to swim,
But not even just parents. I mean, like this is
or
it
like
could
an
be
older sibling or a grandparent.
or the story mentioned not an au pair, but some sort of babysitter who was doing a nanny or something like that,
Like,
and that's utterly reasonable. Come on, like
yeah,
plainly this should be
and to be
allowed,
fair,
but we shouldn't be having unlicensed.
that girl who said she was a nanny said that she wasn't asked to stop after she told the lifeguard she was a nanny. but like this is absurd. Like fellas, is it illegal to have bonding moments with your child
And to teach them how to do a basic life skill that they're going to then,
that
yeah,
keeps them
it's
from
cheaper than
dying?
trying to rescue somebody a few years down the road from the ocean.
Like, oh my god, it's like I'm trying to come up with new things to say about this, David, but I'm still just fucking incredulous. Like,
There's two broader takeaways here that are actually structurally very important. One is write better bylaws or laws if you're subnational and federal. Point one, and two, teach your people who will be enforcing these laws what they are and when they apply,
right.
and
Like,
also expect that these people have some common sense. And
right.
obviously
It's
they
like
don't.
empower your people to have common sense. Do not make them
Yes,
afraid that if they don't crack the whip, you will fire them, because that seems to be
exactly,
how this happens a lot. And
exactly.
the article actually makes a point that in Surrey, Burnaby, and North Vancouver, so all within like the Metro Vancouver area, parents are free to teach their children, obviously, because why wouldn't they be? But I'm glad they clarified for the news. But like here, the what people don't know is like in Ontario we have the school board trustees. We have school board elected school boards, so we're used to that. But in Vancouver, in addition to that, they also have elected park boards. So
Oh
it's
my lord,
yeah,
the
so it's not
stupidest
yeah, it's
thing.
not the only like niche topic elected position they have. I think they're talking about maybe getting rid of them, but
And they
like
should.
David, don't aren't you excited that this is now going to get brought up at like a monthly meeting by an you talked about Karens who supported this, but now you're going to have like an oppositionally like position. You'll have like an oppositional frequency Karen. Like you'll have like a proton and an anti-proton, and they'll meet in like annihilation. Like
Annihilation sounds great.
yeah, it's like
Like,
unstoppable force and moving object.
yeah, if this whole world gets sucked into a black hole or pushed beyond the event horizon or whatever it might be, that sounds fantastic at this point. Because obviously it's just you get these absurd things, and you know what the problem is? It then makes those of us who say we want government to do things look like idiots.
Right.
Because someone
It's
says,
like
"Really, this is what you want government to do?"
because when I call myself a socialist and say that I want bigger government, like people think that I mean like these lunatics who are telling you can't teach your child how to swim because
Exactly.
the elected park board said so.
Exactly.
It's like
Exactly.
every joke about like a small town like Soviet of workers like that you would hear in 1970s USSR like is about the Vancouver Park Board.
Yes.
Like
I
it's
call
the
it,
same picture.
I've been arguing against the park board for a very, very long time, and I call it sort of like democracy's vestigial tale, right?
Yeah.
There's no point. It's an historical accident, and it shouldn't be
Like
there.
surely city council can handle this. Like sure like if you
Of course, you can,
like surely this is within their capacity. That's,
without a doubt.
uh,
Without a doubt, it is.
well, I mean, Ken Sim is working hard on pools, though. He's going to heat them up with Bitcoin mining.
Tell me you covered that one week.
I haven't written about that one, unfortunately, because like it's stupid, but it's unfortunately I don't want to write about it because heating up pools with waste heat from computers, that's not the stupid thing. There are a bunch of places like there's universities where they use like their local computing cluster to heat up like their pool and their aquatic center. That just makes sense. That's efficient. The stupid part is intentionally wasting electricity to mine Bitcoin
Yeah, in the
solely
first
to
place.
heat up a pool rather than just heating up the pool. Like the point is you need a computer you're already using for something and it needs to be something that makes sense.
Because it's not about efficiency; it's about Bitcoin PR.
Right. And like for disclosure, folks, I own about a tenth of a Bitcoin. I didn't mind that. I bought it back when it was about 7,000 Canadian per unit. So I'm like one of 5 people in the country doing well on that front. Like, I'm like,
And you're
so,
heating a pool.
yeah. So it's like, yeah, if when you're asking how I balance my finances and live as a writer, just slowly slivering that off over time. And I
Yeah.
will hopefully not have to think about anything else for 18 months.
Brilliant.
We'll be charitable and call it 18 months. David,
That's
is there anything you would like to share with the audience before we end things up for today?
Well, I just thanks so much for listening. Thanks for having me. I've got a book on nationalism coming out next year that ought to be a lot of fun. I'd love to come back and chat about it, but otherwise,
Yes, we
just
will
thanks again for
absolutely
having
have
me.
you here to talk about your next book, and I am happy that it's coming out as soon as next year. But folks, make sure to read David's current book right now, again, by David Moscrop, published by Goose Lane. It is Too Dumb for Democracy, Why We Make Bad Political Decisions and How We Can Make Better Ones. You can get it in paperback, you can get it in audiobook format, or you can get it in digital ebook format. David Moscrop, thank you so much for joining the program. It has been an absolute pleasure. And again, we'll hopefully have you back soon for your book when it comes out next year. If not
I
sooner.
look forward to it.
Yeah.
That sounds fantastic.
All right. Thank you. David Moscrop, everybody. And that'll do it for this week's episode. Thank you once again to David Moscrop for joining the program. You can read his work at davidmoscrop.com. You can read his book, Too Dumb for Democracy, which I've already told you where you can find it. And you can also read his weekly columns in a bunch of other places, including now at the Globe and Mail, which you should subscribe to just for him, and also for other people. But he's pretty cool. Anyways, next week we will have another great guest for you. Surprise as always, so make sure you tune in to find out who it is. Thank you once again for tuning in, folks, and I hope you have a great rest of your weekend. Cheers. This is the end of the show. Bye.